Welcome to Make America Healthy, where our goal is to empower you, inspire you, and inform you, giving you tools to take better control of your physical and mental health. Today's topic is all about mental health, and the topic is manipulation, gaslighting, hope, and inspiration. And before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors, Life Boost Coffee, the cleanest, most natural, mold-free, shade-grown coffee that you are ever going to put in your mouth. I love this coffee so much. I'm obsessed with it. They have 15 different flavors and blends. They have a decaf. We're actually coming out with a mindfulness blend that's half calf that I have created. So if you're looking for clean, mold-free coffee, please go to lifeboostcoffee.com. You can use the code YogaFit to save 15% at checkout. And once you've had good coffee, it's really hard to go back. So check out Life Boost Coffee. We'd also like to thank our show sponsor, YogaFit Training Systems Worldwide, the leader in yoga, mind, body, fitness education, offering corporate wellness, seminars, online classes, trainings, and so much more. And you can check out YogaFit at yogafit.com. And also you can save 15% at checkout by using the code Make America Healthy. So today's show is an interesting one. I wasn't quite sure how we were going to put it out there to our listeners, but I believe that it is a very important topic when talking about relationships and mental health. And we are joined by two expert doctors today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. First, we'd like to introduce Dr. Frieda Birnbaum. Frieda, welcome to the show. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am a research psychologist. I have a podcast, The Dr. Frieda Show, DoctorFrieda. My website is Dr. Frieda. I have been in this practice of mine for more than 30 years, and I have seen everything. And it's interesting because I've been talking about relationships as far as the reality shows are concerned, and there's a lot of gaslighting there. Let me tell you, it's fun, it's interesting, as long as it doesn't happen to you. So this is a great topic. It's a great show. I have done many shows about relationships. I could go on and on. I'm pumping myself too much already. So thank you.
Thank you for being here, Dr.
Thank
Frieda. Dr. Julie Lopez, welcome to Make America Healthy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Beth, for having me. My name is Dr. Julie Lopez. I have a couple different websites, but I have been practicing for almost 30 years. My specialty is working with trauma. I think we all have been through a huge trauma in the pandemic and COVID and all of the isolation that we've been through. One of the things that I know about trauma, which is going to become really relevant for today, is that when our foundation is shaken or when we don't have a strong sense of ourselves, I like to call it our internal compass, gets clouded over or foggy, it can really change everything. And that's very relevant for what we're going to talk about. I did put out a book right before the pandemic called Live Empowered. So I love your use of the word empowerment in there. I've been doing women's retreats for 15 years, all on transformation and manifestation. And I love empowering people. We started a nonprofit for entrepreneurs. My website's drjulielopez.com. My center, which is operating all up and down the East Coast, is vivapartnership.com. And really near and dear to my heart, which is what this show sounds like also, is really giving access to everyone around how they can be empowered to live their best lives. And we put together a free repository of all kinds of resources called the Resilient Brain Project. And that's at www.resilientbrainproject.com. So I'm psyched to be here and be a part of this conversation that in the end is about empowering all your listeners.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Frieda, I'm going to open it up with you. So let's define what gaslighting is, because it's a term that's thrown around a lot, but maybe some of our listeners don't really know what it means, even if they have personally experienced. What is it, and how do you know that you're experiencing it?
Well, it's extremely important. And what it is about some research I did that I wrote a book about with Price Power. And it seems to be when women have more power and higher status careers, they are less gaslit, if that's a word. It's often the sexes The male is the one that gaslights. In a relationship, as far as business is concerned, that's equal. But what does it really mean? It means it's a psychological manipulation of one person who tries to put the other person's ego down. It's usually somebody who's very unhealthy, who needs to find somebody unhealthy, who is vulnerable to this, because most people who are won't put up with that. And the second question was, again, what did you want to know as far as?
Like, how does someone, we can usually tell if someone's manipulating us. Obviously, if you're in a romantic relationship, those lines get a lot more blurred. I think that we can all agree that the closer someone is to you, the easier access they have to manipulate you or gaslight you. When and where does gaslighting typically occur, and what does it look like?
The typical occurrence is in a relationship, and it's very often a complimentary feeling that somebody's jealous of you, somebody cares about you, they don't want you to be with your friends or your relatives because they want you to be inclusive with them. But then again, people are saying, you look different, you're acting differently, what happened to you? And you're complimented by it because you think, oh, that person's jealous of me. That person really cares about me. But it's usually a narcissistic individual who's very self-centered, who wants you all to themselves. And that's when the red flags begin, because the self-centering part of that has to do a lot with this person being damaged, who needs that other person, that partner in his life, to make up for all the things that were not done, possibly in their youth or at a different stage in their life. And that can't be done. So that's where it begins.
And so what is it? Can you give us some examples? We have listeners who may be experiencing this and don't even know it, or feel like something's not quite right, but they don't know what it is.
Yes, that's very important. The examples are when you start second guessing yourself and they tell you, oh, you're making this up, you're wrong, this never really happened. Then that example is you are not the one in the driver's seat. That other person's telling you what you're feeling and what you're doing. So it's an onset of the relationship psychologically and physically as well. You don't get to see their side of the family. You don't get to see their friends. They don't make the plans for you. You don't talk about future plans. All that is part of the narcissistic situation, red flag situation you're in. And also as far as being responsible, if that person's having an affair on you, if that person's not considerate of your feelings, often marriages or relationships break up. But the person who's victimized will again be in a situation of hope and saying, you know what, maybe this is isolated. Oh, he's going to be or she's going to be okay. But that's not true, because that person has an agenda. They don't want to be okay. They brought you into this relationship, so it shouldn't work. So don't think that by them being conscious of what you're feeling, this will be a cure and they will understand. They fight this in therapy, as I've had many sessions with narcissistic people, with the red flags, with gaslighting. They really fight it, and they're very disappointed. And often they will leave that partner for someone else that will fit into their frame of reference of what it is that you need. So if somebody says to you, you're making it up, it never happened, why are you saying these things? I would run as fast as you can, because that person is not somebody who's going to compromise and really want to make sure that what you're saying is a person who has feelings, a person who has needs, and to go to the other side. Because as a good relationship takes two people wanting it to work and being aware of what the other person needs as if it's your own needs. Once you help that other person, there's this back and forth agreement, the psychological agreement that you're there for each other, to grow together, to have similar plans, to be supportive. At the end of the day, you want somebody to be able to be willing to have empathy for you and to listen to what you're going through, not somebody who's going to deny it and be a baby or be a child and say, take care of me.
Or even worse, the cause of your problems, right? You don't want the person closest to you to be causing your problems, because there's a thousand other places in life that we can find
Exactly.
challenges.
You're right. Exactly what I was going to say. You don't want the mother-son or the father-daughter relationship because that's very unhealthy. You become the caretaker. And that's really something that nobody really benefits, because a good relationship is where you grow together and where you help each other. So if it's one-sided, then there's nobody else on the other side and there's nobody else with you. It's only you. And how boring is that? So nobody gains from it, even the narcissist, even the person who's trying to gaslight, because obviously it's a mental situation that needs to be worked at individually for a long time.
Thank you, Dr. Frieda. Dr. Julie,
Can I,
I
sorry,
jump in.
I just want to jump in on this conversation just a little bit to expand it. I think Dr. Frieda's points were all really important, and the context of them was in a relationship that is intimate. And I just wanted to highlight that you can be gaslit by a coworker,
Yes,
you can be
absolutely.
gaslit by a family member, you
Yes.
can be gaslit by a friend, manipulated, and that it's not just in an intimate romantic
Yes,
relationship.
I agree. Absolutely. And you're right. And I thought about that. I went into the relationship part thinking later I'll speak about the other angles to this gaslighting, but absolutely. And when we're talking about gaslighting at work, it's done in such a manipulative way that women will use it to charm and to flirt and vice versa. And before you know it, it'll be more about the person. And we're talking about business. Some of the best salespeople know how to gaslight other people. That's why they're so good. They're not assertive or aggressive, but they really know how to win you over. And I get these calls every day too. Somehow, hi, how are you? This is Samantha. Who are you? But it happens all over the place. It happens with children.
It happens in the media, doesn't it?
Oh, in the media, always. The media is a whole different animal in itself. You're right. And they really know how to do that.
They sure do. That's why I keep that news turned off.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. Because you do hear different sides of what they want you to hear about. Whatever happened to Walter Cronkite? You hear the facts, you get on, and that's over and it's finished. But you do hear different viewpoints. They do gaslight you with what it is. And after a while, you know them and you trust them. And that's the dangerous part. So there are many different, Julie, you're right, many different areas in our lives. From the minute you wake up, people have to manipulate to get their needs done. And wouldn't it be nice if, hey, wait a minute, I don't have to get anyone to do anything. Let me see if I can do this. What about me? What about me with my own merits, where I'm going in my life? Isn't that a better feeling to be able to count on yourself, not to have to use other people to get your needs met? So
well, that requires a certain amount of self-awareness and self-confidence, and then engaging in practices that are going to build your self-esteem, self-confidence, and knowledge base, which is why I'm such a huge fan of education. I've been a health and wellness educator for over 25 years. And people don't know what they don't know until we educate people on how to take care of their health physically. And through shows like Make America Healthy, take care of their own mental health. We have to be the ever-present witness to what's going on around us and what we're being bombarded with, whether from a person, a coworker, a partner, a friend, a family member, the media, because society unfortunately is set up that way. And especially here in North America, that we really need to be manipulated. I just had Dr. Barry Sears and another doctor on the show, and we were talking about our broken healthcare system. We're making money off sick, unhealthy people in the US. And I would say that you would probably both agree with me that we can say sick, unhealthy people physically as well as mentally. And turning off the television and the news, I think, is a great way to start to take care of your mental health.
That's so true. And we have to be careful. And I don't want to take up all your time, Julie. So I just want to say one other thing. And we have to be careful the messages we ourselves give. That book that I spoke about, What Price Power, it's when women were dependent and then men did. It was usually that in the relationship, and often in other types of relationships, started controlling, but they were also taught to control. So we need to also be aware of the victimization that we give and how we give the message, so other people don't step right in and then say, hey, wait a minute, isn't this what you wanted? So yes, the way we represent ourselves in the media, for one thing, which is very dangerous, you're absolutely right. because we're talking about our future and making the right decisions for our future. And what are the real facts anyway? The minute we get up in the morning, we have to be able to tune in on yourself. When I was going for my PhD, this reminds me, I said to my mentor, I said to her, tell me what to do. She said, if I have to tell you what to do, you don't belong here. So I was very upset. I was very disappointed, but she was right. I have to be the one who looks to myself and not blame. So we have to look at both sides of this type of gaslighting. What kind of stage are you in? Are you in a vulnerable situation? Are you hungry to be told what to do by somebody else? Do you feel, as you've said, Beth, that your self-esteem is so low that you can't trust yourself? We need to educate our children to be able to be leaders, not followers. And that's really where it does start, in the school system. And that's one thing that's also dangerous.
It's also dangerous because they haven't taught critical thinking skills probably in 30 years. And when I interact with people in their teens, the lack of common sense and critical thinking blows my mind.
It's very sad because they teach you to memorize. I don't remember anything I learned with all my schooling. I'll tell you the truth, because it has nothing to do with your critical thinking. It has to do with being followers. So then they push you out of school and they tell you to be a leader. Well, duh.
Or they tell you to go work for a corporation.
Yes. Go work
so you can be more of a follower.
That's right. And so what do you do with all that stuff? We have to be able to see ourselves in a way where my son, who was a computer, basically, and I would say to him, Ari, what are you doing? Go out with your friends. He says, Mom, the only way I can learn anything is to be able to do it on my own. I don't learn anything in school. They were robots. They tell us what to do. Then we go out in the world and we are being gaslit, because then the world tells us who we should be, what we should do, where we should go. And I don't agree with any of that stuff. So I gave him a lot of credit for stepping away, but it's hard to step away because you're not one of your peers. You're not accepted. You're criticized. My whole life I've been criticized. I've never been one of, but that was my choice.
We have that in common then.
Yeah. Thank God. I lost friends along the way. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Who does she think? I got on the elevator. I was going to school and I had kids. Are you really a good mother? Do you think you can do all this stuff? So it's always trying to find my own voice, because otherwise 10 years later, I'd be sorry and say, hey, look what I wanted to do. This is what's happening. So being gaslit, you can be gaslit by anybody who doesn't have confidence in where they are and wants to manipulate you.
The ironic thing, and I've found this because I've also experienced gaslighting in my life, a lot of times those people will show up as self-appointed experts or show with a very strong persona so that you actually think you can trust them and rely on them. And they're actually the weakest people. So I'm going to ask this question to both of you.
Go ahead. I took a lot of your...
There's time for everybody on Make America Healthy.
All right.
Everybody has their own voice. Okay. I was going somewhere with this, and that is that I've been doing yoga and other mind-body practices since age 6. So I have a pretty good sense of when I can feel someone is strong and when someone's emotionally blocked or has a wall up, a barrier. Give us some strategies, Julie, on how to assess an individual to decide whether or not we even want to allow the space for them to either potentially support us or tear us down with manipulation or gaslighting.
This is such a great question, and it's leading me right to what I wanted to share on the show, since your goal is to empower, inspire, and inform people. The good news to all of this is that each and every one of us has an internal compass that will tell us what is best for us, that will tell us who we are, what we are interested in, what our desires are. And the practice of being connected and attuned to ourself is the antidote. It is what feeds boundaries. It is what gives volume to our voice. And the only person that we really need to know and hear and honor is ourselves. And I'm not saying that, oh, don't honor anyone else. But when you talk about strategies for whether or not we're going to let someone into our sphere, that inner compass is always going to tell us what's right for us. And if someone tries to override the messages that you're getting, or I guess the vulnerable people are disconnected from their inner compass, like you just talked about, through grooming and culture and society, through insecurity. A lot of people who've gone through hard times might feel like they're less than, or they're damaged goods, or they're insecure. And so they always have that little voice, but may not be good at protecting it, at listening to it, at hearing what's happening. You talked about boundaries, which is so important for everybody. That compass will tell us what our great boundaries are. So if someone's coming into our orbit as a friend, as a coworker, as a lover, as a family member, and they aren't supportive of us having our own voice and rather want us to adopt their way, then that's the beginning signs that they're going to try to pull you into their orbit instead of honor and encourage your own blossoming. And I think when that happens, the whole world suffers, right? We all need to be ourselves, and that's where we all start to blossom.
So this topic of boundaries is an interesting one. I was just sharing with someone the other day, like I have found in the past 2 years or so that my boundaries have gotten a lot tighter than they used to be. And it's been an ongoing process for me growing up in a household that didn't really encourage proper boundaries. Let's just say that. What strategies would you give to our listeners to help them define and strengthen? Because we also don't want to be too tight as individuals that we don't have the openness and the flexibility to life, right? So there's got to be a delicate balance. What strategies would you give to our listeners to help them tighten up their boundaries so that disrespectful behavior, inappropriate behavior, manipulation, gaslighting doesn't have space in the room?
Yes.
Can I just say
so,
go ahead. I just wanted to say one quick thing, Julie. You know what I tell people, and I tell patients as well, very simple, but that is go with your gut feeling. If you walk away from somebody and you feel less than, something just happened. And usually it takes a while. As you evolve more and you become more aware of it, as you're saying, Beth, as you get older, you have more boundaries. You're more aware of the people around you, and therefore you can do it quicker. Wait a minute. I don't feel so great after talking to the person. What just happened? And I can guarantee you, you will identify something that just happened that wasn't that supportive, that didn't make you feel so good. But it does take a while to be in touch with those feelings. Therapy often helps as well. So I just wanted to present to the people that are listening that it can be done in a very quick, decisive way as you start trusting yourself more and more. Just walk away. How do you feel? Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? That's it. Okay, Julie, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I do think it's pretty complicated because it depends a lot on what's going on that deeper level, on that internal kind of control panel that we all have. It's very easy to read a book, right? And read and understand the dynamics of boundaries, intellectually understand how to do them, how to actually use them in relationships. It's a very different thing if you're used to and were groomed to override your own boundaries, maybe disconnected from what your boundaries are. It's very complicated. And so I find not only does the deeper work of changing some of these codes that may come from traumatic experiences, and when I say trauma, I'm not just talking about war and rape and violence, but also there are some chronic ongoing traumas that someone may have just by being in a relationship. Just going to make this up here now, but I've had plenty of clients that have had this experience where one of their parents was completely unavailable. So they experienced neglect in a chronic way. It gets even more complicated when that neglect doesn't look like poverty or like lack of food, but it's successful, accomplished parents and the white picket fence, but they're very emotionally unavailable or narcissistic. So there are all types of things that can really interrupt how our nervous system's feeling. I would say a couple, because you're asking for solutions. I would say, Dr. Frieda already mentioned it, therapy can get at some of those deeper root influencers on having struggles with boundaries. I would also say tribe, like groups, people. You've built a community here with your listenership. When there's a group of people struggling with the same thing or raising one another up, that's very powerful, especially when going against something that you might have been trained to overlook in your life. So I think a lot of those things can be super helpful. People struggling together is really powerful, right? Seeing someone else having the same struggle and you're lifting each other up can be really helpful in terms of doing better with boundaries. There are very specific techniques around power. So if there's a big boundary being crossed, like a boss at work who's touching you in an inappropriate way, that's a huge power dynamic. And that can be really difficult to confront head on if you feel like your salary or your livelihood is going to be threatened. So there are some lower level strategies you can use by just going with the energy of the person who's crossing your boundaries, like just repeating back a question. Did you just put your hand on my shoulder right now and you're asking me whether or not I'm going to go to the happy hour after work? And just drawing attention to something without saying stop it or get your hand off of me, which can feel threatening depending on those power dynamics, can help someone start to improve their repertoire, right? Just like anything we want to accomplish, when you chunk it into smaller pieces, it can feel much more doable. So I just gave that as a quick example, but using things that feel less threatening, especially if someone grew up in a household where confrontation meant someone going to the hospital or confrontation meant serious consequences, it may feel like too much to just all of a sudden come out of the gate as the most assertive person who walks away from relationships and tells people firmly not to do this or to do that. It can feel like too big of a jump. So I do think there are incremental ways to start to expand on how you negotiate boundaries.
I love that. And I love that you gave a very practical example that probably a lot of us could relate to. Two questions. One, the 12-step model. I know there are a lot of different 12-step groups out there. Is there a particular 12-step group that would help people strengthen their own boundaries?
There is. Codependence Anonymous. That's the core 12-step, right? Which is looking at the way codependency is a full blurring of boundaries. And so when you lose yourself, that's when you become very vulnerable to manipulation and gaslighting. When you're very connected to your sense of self, you know what your desires are, you know what your limits are. It doesn't matter how much someone's trying to gaslight you, you won't fall prey to it. You'll just say, wow, I guess we have a difference of opinion. And it'll be as simple as that.
So I guess the nice thing about the 12-step model is it's practically free. So for people who can't afford a therapist,
it's 100% free.
Okay, but you make a donation.
Yeah. Or you buy a book.
Yeah. But it's a great way for people who are thinking about maybe going to therapy to stick their toe in and be around a supportive group of individuals. You can look for Codependence Anonymous meetings in your area, and I would venture to guess that a lot of them are online now since the pandemic. And then also, as we, talk about manipulation, gaslighting, the people who are doing the manipulation and the gaslighting, is this a conscious or subconscious behavior for people? Are they purposefully doing it, or are they just so used to doing it that they're not even aware that they're doing it?
It's very conscious. That's the problem. And that's why this is so difficult to fix. And that's why a lot of these people go into these fields that really represent who they are. And just to answer that question as well, it all has to do with self-esteem. Boss touching your shoulder inappropriately or whatever, or your back or whatever they're doing. When did that start? And as a child, did you have boundaries? And did your parents teach you? It's so simple. I'd like to go to the simple philosophies, maybe because I'm simple, I don't know, but because it seems to make sense. When you have a certain way of looking at your body, even as a child, and you have concerns or discomfort about what it is, you should not question that, because as an adult, you'll question yourself as well. So it's very important to be able to have an identity with your self-esteem of what it is that you expect others, the way they should treat you, and what is appropriate to begin with. So this dependency issue that we do have does not have to be there. You can be independent and a self-thinker without having to go through it. Now, as Julie said, when there's abuse in the family,
And let's look at the
Yeah.
statistics. They say 1 in every 4 women has had some type of a sexual trauma or assault as a
Yes,
child. And
absolutely.
I think that actually those numbers are probably higher. So you have that. So I would imagine that the propensity for women to be gaslit and
Yes.
manipulated more than men is there because also we're trained to be to a certain degree subservient. And for many people, and I've traveled all around the world from Japan to Turkey, Saudi Arabia, certain cultures, misogyny is stronger than others, but in certain cultures, mostly it's still there. Or then we say that becomes more of a female problem than a male problem. And I have a lot of friends that have teenage daughters, and I'm like, send them to the gym, have them start lifting weights, because being in a strong body gives you such a sense of power. I also wish that we put all of our men and women in the military like they do in Israel, because I know from leading many yoga fit trainings in Israel, those ladies are tough. Short of we're not doing that in this country, but send your daughters to the gym, have them experience what it feels like to be strong.
Can I jump in just for a moment?
Okay.
Because I disagree with Dr. Frieda. I do not believe it's always conscious. Even in the example, I think it can be conscious and I think it can be unconscious. And unconscious, still unhealthy when someone has been taught or trained. And we'll just use the example I gave of the boss, the person in power putting his hand inappropriately on his subordinate's arm, may have thought, oh, this is what women like. This makes them feel more beautiful, and doesn't actually see it as something that's intimidating. Conscious, no, not about the gaslighting, not about the manipulation. Conscious of the movement, sure. I'm using that example because it's the one we're following, but I think it's actually a lot more complicated. I think people engage in manipulation all the time, and you use the example of the media. It is a common practice to create deficit.
Okay.
It's a commonly accepted sales tactic. You lack, and I'm going to provide.
Right.
And so underneath that lack is the undermining of your sense of self and what you need. Like, I thought it was totally fine, but then I saw this picture of this closet pornography, which is like 5 shirts and they're all facing the same way with the beautiful shelves and the books and the bags and shoes. My closet doesn't look like that. Maybe I do need that whole closet redesigned because I want my closet to look like that, or my home to look like that, right? The pictures are designed to make you feel less so that you'll buy something.
Even the purchasing of designer goods and purses and belts and shoes and
But Beth, things are changing actually, and I do have to disagree with that.
oh, I love it when my guests disagree. We like controversy on this show, so have at it, ladies.
Almost 70% of college students are women today. So when we're talking about being codependent, that is changing. And as I said before in my research, that women with high status careers have more power today even than men, and are making more money. So we have to catch up with the times. A man touching a woman or a subordinate on the shoulder has a different definition today than it did 30, 40, 50 years ago, because we don't have these roles anymore in front of us. Women are often the ones that are the boss, and women are also conscious. So when we're talking about power, we're talking about what's right or wrong to do. It's not male, female so much today. It's more your orientation of being a good humanitarian, of what's equal. And today, more than ever, the genders are more equal. And so we're looking at it very different. And let's face it, what men got away with years ago, they're going to court now for. They're not getting away with that anymore. We're not looking away. So it is a different society today. And men are not dummies, and they're conscious of it. And how many studs do we see out there? What do guys look like? You go to the gym, things have changed. Role reversal, I have to tell you, where were they when I was their age? I didn't get that. But role reversal has really changed today. And men and women are both equally looked at in the same manner, with their business abilities, with their physique, with their sexuality. Everything has come out of the closet. And it's not someone who is not aware, because if I'm driving down the highway and I see a big poster of some guy, I'm not going to take advantage and say, hey, because I saw this picture, I have a privilege. No. Today we have different messages given to us. I did research on relationships for years. I've done research and the inequity and what women had to go through and how unfair it was. But guess what? It has changed. And it's not the same anymore. And that's why these men today are not getting away with it. They are not.
But I actually don't think gaslighting is a gendered issue. This year, I wasn't gaslit. It was an attempt at gaslighting by a female.
Yeah, but you're right. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's no excuse, no matter what gender you are, male, female.
If we were to reclassify this, we would say that it is conscious people versus unconscious people. Yes.
You know how this started, gaslighting? There was a play, believe it or not, I go back. I was born after that, but still, otherwise I wouldn't be here. 1938, there was a man who wanted to steal jewelry from his wife. So he took a gaslight, went to the attic and stole her jewelry and told her that she was crazy, that she didn't have this jewelry, nobody took it. Then Alfred Hitchcock, years later, went ahead and he made a movie out of it.
And what was the name of the movie?
Gaslight. That was the name of the movie. And because of that, it became something like, oh, wait a minute, this is an epiphany. This sounds familiar. This is what's been happening. So yes, we have a way of manipulating, no matter what the gender orientation is. But today, there is no excuse to manipulate anyone, no matter what gender they are, because we don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in a closet. Everybody's coming out. Everybody's being accepted for who they are as a human being. Forget about everything else. So there's no excuses. That's over with. We need to step up. We need to step into another zone in our lives. Where are we today? Stop blaming. Stop looking at everything. Stop being threatened at everyone. I have a phrase I tell my patients. I always say, make life happen rather than life happening to you. And when you get down to the basics, and this is where the way I've always been working, people are freed to be able to see that no matter what words we use, I don't label my patients because I think labeling is not a good deal. It makes you stuck with where you are. Gaslighting, whatever that is, we need to be passé. We need to be over all these things. We need to be able to see. If you have trauma, you deal with the initial trauma, where it came from, you work it through. But then again, therapy is known to blame your mother. The poor mothers out there, we're blaming our mothers, not our fathers. And guess what? Research has shown that fathers have more of an impact on children than mothers do. So we need to be able to look at what is really going on when we keep blaming. And yes, people who are gaslighting do it because they have a need to do it for whatever reason, and they hold on to that reason. But in reality, when we look at making changes in our lives, it's about centering yourself, becoming evolved, knowing what you would need to do to work on yourself, and pushing everything aside, whether it's the trauma you went through, whether it's how you visualize things. I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor. And my parents came to this country from, I guess it was at the time I was born in Germany, from Poland. And they went through a lot of trauma, let me tell you, a lot of near-death experiences. I wouldn't have survived because my father went to a camp where they needed 8 people to raise their hands and tell them what happened. I would have been one of the 8, for sure. I would have been killed off. I would not have survived it. But you have to know how to manipulate the process and what to do. My father was a short man. He wasn't a hero, but he knew how to manipulate. He came from a lot of abusive situations. So this is what he taught me. He taught me to fight. We all go through a lot. I've gone through traumas in my relationship. I'm still married. We all go through a lot of stuff. But really, I found that when we dwell on things, we stay there. I've just had a horrible tragedy a couple weeks ago. I can't even tell you about it, but I'm moving on. And I could sit here and talk about my trauma, and you could feel bad for me. and we could still hold each other emotionally, but it's going to sink me in further. We need to move on. When you see somebody's gaslighting, get out of there. They have an agenda. They want to stay with this person, or they will find somebody else. Whether it's conscious or not conscious, their agenda is there. And unless they want to work on it, unless they go to therapy for years, and most people do not want to work on it, they are going to continue to do this to somebody else. And that's the message that I need to give to people. Go back to yourself. Don't look at the person who's doing it. Don't look at your situation. Don't look at work. Don't look at the boss. Don't look at fixing. My generation fixed. The women's revolution. We fixed and we fix. And we are in a place right now that the only person we could have fixed was ourselves. As you said, Beth, by being more educated, by being able to see each other, to see ourselves, and to respect who we are as people. And you know, and another thing my research has shown, because I did research on these things, the women who are the least manipulative are the most educated. The women who are most accomplished are the least competitive and the most supportive. So there you go.
I believe that 100%, Dr. Frieda. Thank you so much for that.
That's why we're talking.
And in fact, you know what? That was so good that I would love you to repeat those last two lines again.
The women that are least competitive are the most accomplished. This is what my research showed. And the women who are the most manipulative are the least educated. And I'm telling you, with my friendships, I keep away from those women. They're the hardest to deal with. They can't tolerate. How many times my husband is an attorney? No one said to him, I should have been an attorney. I could have been an attorney. Nobody said that to him. Nobody cared. Me, I could have gone for a PhD. Go for a PhD. Take statistics. Take research. Why do women have to be devalued? Go do your own thing. If you envy somebody, go ahead and copy it, but do it yourself. Life is work. Don't fall into a trap. Don't say, per me, I'm dependent because of so and so. No, you're dependent because you set it up. Somebody who's gaslighting you is reading you and has picked you for a reason. It's not
Dr. Frieda, I have been my own mental health practitioner since the pandemic. But if I was going to go to a therapist, I would go to you. And I've had lots of therapists on the show, I will say, but I really love this whole like get empowered and take it on yourself. That's what make it. That's what Make America Healthy is all about. It's about you educating yourself, empowering yourself, getting inspired so that you can be the best version of yourself on every level. Julie, let's take a detour to solutions, dealing with trauma. And how to self-empower, just climbing on what Frieda put out there.
Yeah, I think that each person has the ability to make their way and find their path. And there are an awful lot of tools out there. Actually, my center does a very low cost, no barriers to entry workshop group that we do all year long called the Holistic Presentations for Growth. Again, it's like a low cost love offering, but the more you're empowered, the more education you get on the different tools that are out there, the more that you can rework what's going on in your own body. We talk about things like nature-informed therapy. We've done work on body-based work, brain-based work, how to do very specific and accessible things that will help you fortify your sense of what your own internal compass is. And this actually goes to the Resilient Brain Project, where there are very specific experiential exercises that you can do to change things in your body. It's a whole repository of empowerment-based material, and it's all free. I'm very aligned with that idea of being able to change how we're interfacing in the world. I definitely am aligned with that kind of a concept. I think when we start thinking about deficit-based thinking, it feels like other people have the power, other people's ideas, desires are more important than our own. And that's when we start to fall into difficult situations and relationships.
Wonderful. So as we move towards the close of the show, any final thoughts on empowerment, where to get the tools, daily practices? I have affirmations on my mirror in my bathroom.
Love that.
And I'm a magnet for miracles. Today is a good day. I'm a good person and good things will come. Whatever your thing of affirmations is, I find that if I'm in a challenging situation, I'll tell myself I am peaceful, I am calm, I am strong. If I'm at the doctor's office and they're doing a blood draw, I repeat to myself, I am strong, I am strong, I am strong. So there are these little affirmations that, because our brain focuses on 5 times the negative to 1 time the positive, so we're not necessarily wired for all this positivity, which leads to positive self-esteem and good boundaries and all of that. So I in my personal experience, and again, working with millions of people around the world through Yoga Fit for over 25 years, affirmations are very helpful. Would you each like to give our listeners 2 of your favorite affirmations?
One of mine is on my card, on my business card, it says a no-nonsense approach to therapy. And that's what I'm known for, a no-nonsense approach to life. I feel that when we simplify it, my main practice used to be, and I still have, young women coming in at 35 and saying to me, what happened along the way? Where am I? What is my lot in life? This is it. I'm going to take care of my children. What is my future? I was so optimistic. So I was so hopeful. And your lot in life is the essence of who you are. And get back to that. And it's always the right time to do it. But if you think you have to do it perfectly, it's never going to be done. Get up and do it. Pick the phone up, make the calls, make the connections. It starts, it keeps moving. I have seen more successful people walk out of my office. That's what feeds me. Yes, they do pay me because women need to be paid to be valued. I really think most volunteer people are women, and I don't like it. I had a patient here the other day. He says, I have to be valued. I have to be paid. I have to say to you that the most pleasure I get out of my practice is seeing women who go out there in the world and become attorneys, become MDs, go into the media. And so that's my inspiration.
Thank you. So we are out of time. Once again, I would like to thank our show sponsors, Life Boost Coffee, the cleanest, most delicious. I like their dark roast mocha blend. And you can use the code HEALTHY10 at lifeboostcoffee.com to save 10% at checkout. If you enjoyed this show, dear listener, please share it. And I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Frieda, Dr. Julie, and namaste, everyone. We will see you next time. Have a healthy, beautiful, peaceful, inspired day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.